now.
Good morning. My name is Peter Hurst. I'm the President and CEO of the Greater New England Minority Supplier Development Council, and the Council and our corporate partner, Bridgewater State University, welcome you today to what we hope will be a very informative webinar on supply chain management in times of COVID-19. I'd like to start our webinar today by introducing two friends and colleagues from Bridgewater State, Corey Bowdry and Jennifer Reed. Corey is a corporate relations officer at Bridgewater State, and Jennifer is director of professional, corporate, and community education. Jennifer?
Thank you, Pete. Thank you, Peter. Good morning, everyone. We are happy to be here today with the Greater New England Minority Supplier Development Council to build upon the great work of my colleague, Corey Bowdry and Peter Hurst. The College of Continuing Studies at Bridgewater State University offers affordable, part-time bachelor degree completion programs at night and online. We also offer certificate programs and non-credit professional development programs. Whether you or your staff members want to get ahead in your current profession, switch careers, or simply fulfill the dream of earning an undergraduate or graduate degree, we have a program that will work for you. Bridgewater is a transfer-friendly university. We accept college credits from accredited 2- or 4-year institutions, allowing you to move through a program more quickly. Old college credits are a valuable commodity, and you may discover that you or your staff members are closer than you think to earning your bachelor's degree. In addition to our 36 undergraduate majors and 35 graduate degree programs, we now offer a brand new Bachelor of Science degree in management fully online. But keep in mind, unlike other institutions, students in our online programs are not limited to online courses. We allow our students to take on-campus or hybrid courses in the pursuit of the degree if they wish. If you'd like to know more, please visit our website at bridgew.edu or feel free to reach out to me directly. We are pleased to have Dr. Torres Policio here today to offer this webinar. He is a respected professor in our management department, and he will share his knowledge on this very important and timely topic of supply chain in this COVID-19 era. Thank you.
So thank you, Jennifer. I'd now like to take the opportunity to introduce Dr. Torres Palacio. He is a PhD, MBA, and Master of Science in Industrial Engineering from Purdue University. In his native country, Ecuador, he holds degrees in business administration, law, computer programming, and he's also a CPA. As Jennifer indicated, Dr. Torres Palacio is a faculty member at Bridgewater State University in Massachusetts. He teaches manufacturing and service operations management, supply chain management, Six Sigma, topics in operations, and supply chain management, project management, principles of management, small business management, and business-to-business marketing. Previously, he was an assistant professor in Texas. He actually taught in my hometown of Houston, Texas, we found out this morning. And he was also an assistant professor and MBA program coordinator in the state of Pennsylvania, as well as an instructor at Purdue University. His publication topics include Hellenic manufacturing, Six Sigma, lean manufacturing, demand forecasting, project management, finance, and product lifecycle management. He's also an entrepreneur, and he has been a junior accountant and an investment and credit consultant. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome Dr. Torres Palacio to lead us through this very informative topic. Dr. Torres Palacio, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Peter. Thank you for a very nice introduction. So, hello, good morning, everybody. Very glad to be presenting this conference. It's called Supply Chain Management in Times of COVID-19, of the coronavirus, which this pandemic that we are facing these days. Very good. So I'll go briefly. Okay, this is an outline. So I'll explain briefly what this presentation is going to be. And it pretty much is, the idea is to have a memory refreshment or review of current tendencies in supply chain management, things that are being doing in these days, or were doing previous days to the pandemic. So more modern techniques and strategies that many corporations were engaged into. So we'll just review those, and then the most important thing would be to analyze how the pandemic, the coronavirus, has affected the supply chain management and the way of seeing business overall. Everything has changed. I have no need to highlight that fact. Our personal lives and, of course, businesses and corporations have changed in their view and the way they're dealing with customers and partners and overall with negotiations. And to conclude with some proposals and strategies that, given the uncertainty that coronavirus has brought, we can apply certain criteria, discoveries, and previous techniques that have worked very well, and apply them to be able to handle this pandemic and have still successful supply chain management during these times. So the outline includes, as you can see, the modern supply chain management, a brief introduction of COVID-19, which we already know, and predicting the impact of this pandemic in the future. We'll be measuring that. Dealing with the uncertainty in supply chains, which mostly affects the inventory, and the need to have a safety inventory and therefore manage the safety inventory. We will mention how to represent this uncertainty of coronavirus. We'll see a little bit of numbers that might help us to take the most appropriate decisions. The function of technology, as we're doing right now, due to pandemic, we are connected virtually using the camera and the computer. So obviously technology is playing a role of paramount importance these days. Obviously supply chain management is no exception. We'll see some adaptive behaviors that companies and corporations should observe and follow. And to conclude, I'll be presenting some strategies, as I mentioned, that could be very helpful in during these times of of coronavirus and dealing with the coronavirus. So we have to mention that here we can see COVID-19, sorry, the small typo there, COVID-19 offensive is also an opportunity for competitive advantage. So whoever handles and manages these threats of coronavirus is will gain competitive advantage. And these days, as we can see in this small representation, this map, we have North America. We can mention that everybody wants a piece of this pie. And we can see several of the foreign corporations and companies, Toyota, Hyundai, Isuzu, Audi, Volvo, Honda, most especially Japanese companies, BMW, German, as we know. So most important thing that we have observed is that imports have been affected with the coronavirus. So this is more a reality now. If before this pandemic, everybody wanted a piece of this pie, we can mention that American corporations and companies certainly must be prepared to act and react in the supply chain management in order to be competitive and be able to gain competitive advantage, which is obviously very important. So modern supply chain management, as I was mentioning, we can have a brief memory refreshment or comments about current tendencies, current strategies, philosophies, ways of doing business within operations. Include these characteristics that we see here: flexible resources, cellular layouts, pull system, Kanbans, small lots, quick setups, uniform production levels, quality at the source, and total productive maintenance. Perhaps you have heard about many of these in the past. There have been common techniques and operation management styles. So the first one, flexible resources. Again, this is just to refresh and make a presentation of what the modern way of doing and getting engaged into supply management was just before the pandemic started. So it was important to arrange machines in U-shape, talking about flexible resources, as we can see here in this graphic representation. When the supply chain and the machine and overall the assembly lines were in straight line, as we can see here, and we have these 5 employees. This was the way that it was done many years ago, but now we used to do it instead of straight line in a U shape. The reason is that it allows us to achieve more efficiency. If you imagine the first person who is working in the supply chain or the assembly line, he is working with a hammer, for example, and this last person in the line is also working with a hammer. Again, just to give an example. So what is the company going to do? Buy 2 hammers? Well, okay, but that will duplicate the costs, and we always are interested in minimizing cost. So the idea is buy only 1 hammer, and the operators, employees may share that hammer when they're not needing it. They can share it. But what happens? This person at the beginning is using the hammer, and the last person here in the line needs that hammer, so he has to work all this distance, go back where the first person is and said, hey, may I borrow your hammer? Said, yeah, sure, take it. Okay, then has to walk back to his place of work and be working with that hammer. Later on, the first person says, hey, I want my hammer back. So he has to stand up, travel all this distance. The assembly line says, hey, I want my hammer back. I need it. I say, okay, thank you. Here you are. So he has to go with that hammer back to the place where he was working. So all that movement and waste of time is what we call muda. The technical word is muda, Japanese word that means waste. So it's a waste of time. There are several kinds of waste. Many people and authors mention 7, and precisely waste of time and movement are two of those. So the most efficient way is to arrange our facility in a U form. As you can see now, if you notice, now we have only 4 employees instead of 5. So it allows us a certain synergy in the sense that we can even need less employees than before. And the idea is that being in a U form, the assembly line and the production overall, now here in the center, we can have a table, for example, or a shelf, and all the tools, the machinery, everything can be shared very easily. So no need to move and stand up and ask and borrow something, ask for something. Everybody works here and the tools will be here in the center, and it's easy to communicate. It improves the communication channels as in this form. As mentioned here, coordinated operation cycle time with the takt time of the product or service being produced. The takt time is what determines the speed of production and the speed of the operations. Takt is a word that comes from German, the German language. It means rhythm, like the rhythm is like an opera or a music director, the rhythm, the speed. So this term used in music originally has been adapted into supply chain management. So it determines the speed of the operation. In many circumstances, that takt time or speed of operation is determined by the speed of the conveyor belt. The next one, cellular layouts. We have this example here. We can mention the cells group the similar machines together to process a family of parts with similar shapes or process requirements. So the layout of machines with this cell again resembles a U shape, as we can see here on the right. So the work is moved within the cell, ideally 1 unit at a time, from one process to the next by a worker as he or she walks around in the cell in a prescribed path. So because cells produce similar items, setup time requirements are low and lot sizes can be reduced. It's important to work in small lot sizes. This is a very common lesson that we have in operations and supply chain management. You can see here to the right, we have these columns as inventory. So it's a huge level of inventory, which is not a good idea. From an accounting perspective, as we know, inventory is considered an asset. It's an asset, obviously, because it's property that belongs to the company. But many times we're surprised that from supply chain management, inventory is not considered an asset but a liability. So how can this be? So not to mention that accounting principles are wrong. No, they are correct. Its inventory is a property of the company. But seen from the operations and supply chain management, and especially from efficiency, we can certainly mention that the more inventory that we have is not a good idea unless it is sold. What good does it do to us or to the company to have full warehouses full of inventory if that inventory is not sold into the market? Then we're losing money. That's why that's the reason why from operations and supply chain management we say that it's a liability that the company has with itself, we can call it. So the purpose is to reduce this inventory, and you can see it's a big column, big level of inventory, and it's broken down into 4 parts. Each part goes into one cell, and we have here this representation 4 cells. So previous layouts have this kind of design. So we have here, for example, mills, drills, green lathers, heat treat, gear cutting, and so on. And all these arrows that you see here are a representation of the movement and relationships in the supply chain. So as you can see, it's so complicated, as spaghetti style. So what we should do, modern techniques advise us to, first, we will count how many of these we have. This is the table that you see here on the left, lower left corner. So we count how many lathers, how many mills, how many drills, heat treating, grinders, and everything, how many of these we have, and we distribute more or less equally. So we can see the cell Each cell has, this cell 1 has one drill, cell 2 has another drill, cell 3 doesn't have it because we only have 3, and the last cell also has a drill. Same thing with the others. The mill, we have one in each cell, in each one of the 4 cells. So we divide all the areas, the departments and tools and machineries more or less equally into cells. And in that way, we can break down the big inventory and work with small lots, which is what we need, what modern techniques advises. What are the benefits of manufacturing cells like this? First, better human relations. Second, improved operation expertise. Third, less in-process inventory and material handling. And four, faster production setup. Okay, the next one is the pull system. We have basically 2 systems, push and pull, represented here, these arrows. Previously, companies used to engage into the push system. Push system, what does that mean? It means that factories and manufacturing facilities, companies, they produce inventory as crazy, as much as they can, and it was believed in the previous years, many time ago, that the more we produce, the better. We have more inventory to sell. So every workstation produce as many as they can, and they push it to the next workstation when they completed the job, do their part, and then push it to the next workstation, and so on within the supply chain. And ultimately, this was pushed to the marketing department, and the marketing department tried to push it to the customer, as we know. So many companies today, they still apply the push strategy, especially retailing. For example, Walmart, Target are the perfect examples. They still, until these days, utilize and engage into the push strategy. That's why we go to Walmart and we always see full shelves of merchandise. And perhaps sometimes you have wondered, when are they going to sell all this? And that is a great question. So modern techniques advise us to utilize the pull strategy instead of push. So we have to do the opposite. As we see in this representation, the factories push everything here to the people, to consumers. But now with a pull system, we do the opposite. We start right here with the consumers. We do a market analysis. We forecast demand with linear regression, a smoothing method, any method of forecasting demand. And from that point on, we pull back. We pull back to every workstation, manufacturing exactly what is needed, not a single unit more, to avoid muda or to avoid waste. So we pull back and plan accordingly, and the factory produces exactly what is needed. By the way, the pull system, has to be mentioned, is the basis of what we call lean manufacturing or lean thinking, which is producing, thinking about generating value for the customer and avoiding the muda or waste. Kanbans, perhaps you have heard about Kanbans before. Kanban, again, like many technical terms in operations and supply chain management, had its origins in Japanese language. Kanban means signal in Japanese. So it used to be a card or simply a container. So when they displayed that card, or they saw a container that was empty, then supervisor knew that they have to replenish the materials. So it was a way to project and a signal indicating most likely that something was needed in particular. Now, in these days of coronavirus, there's a paramount importance of having electronic Kanbans for obvious reasons. Like we see this guy here, this representation wearing a mask. And these days, this is imperative, as we know, in times of coronavirus. And these circles that you see on the wall in this factory looks like a clock, but actually it isn't a clock. It is a Kanban, so it has these bulbs. So the lights turn on to give a different signal and to project a message, to send a message. So these Kanbans usually provide us lots of benefit in terms of movement of materials and the organization. Perhaps you have ever tried that restaurant called Fogo de Chão. It's Brazilian restaurant, and they have this system that you have like a cluster. You display it in green, and you don't have even to order. The waitress will come and keep you serving until you turn that signal the other way and put it in red, and then they know that you want to stop. They won't serve you anymore. That is practically a Kanban system. It's projecting signals. Now, the need of working in small lots, this is what was already mentioned. Again, here we have that representation of a big inventory. We try to cut it, as was mentioned before, and divide it to we work by different cells. So it's easier to work with small lots by different cells. So it's easier, more practical, and obviously we save lots of costs as well. This brings us this idea of having the big inventory that we are cutting here. We're dividing these big levels of inventory, like we mentioned before, is not good. Brings us to the analogy of the iceberg. So an iceberg, by physics law, every time we see an iceberg, actually as big as it could look in the outside, actually iceberg comes from German. Berg means mountain in German. So iceberg is mountain of ice. So it could look like a big mountain. But even though you see it very big on the outside, underneath the sea level, it's actually even bigger. So 80–90% of the volume of ice of an iceberg is actually below the water. We cannot see it navigating in the sea or in the water as we can imagine. So this analogy is that iceberg represents problems in production. What kind of problems? You name it. Defects, redundant units, waste of time, unreliable suppliers, capacity imbalance, dirt, lack of safety, extra cost, extra time, bottlenecks, all those problems. And the sea level is the inventory. So if we reduce the inventory, we work with small lots, it's like reducing the sea level that we see here. Therefore, we can see more of the iceberg. So working with small inventory allows us to see more of those problems. Therefore, look for a solution to solve them. Another important strategy, quick setups. Has been mentioned that separate internal setups from external setups is the idea. An internal setup is an element that consists of those steps that must be performed when the machine or operation is stopped. An external setup consists of those steps that can be performed while the operation is running. Uniform production levels is also important to consider. We try to decrease or lower the variations in production, and if possible, try to work with a steady demand that could be predictable, which doesn't happen in the COVID-19 times, by the way. Quality at the source, again, we can mention the importance of producing in smaller lots because it provides or ends up in better quality and more efficiency. Employ or engage with the polka yokes. Perhaps you have heard this before. Polka yoke means error proving, and the idea is to prevent a mistake from becoming a defect. So avoid a mistake from becoming a defect. So polka yoke is any action, could be an action, or most likely a device or something that does not work at all unless you are correctly using it. The simplest example that I give in my classes to my students is everybody's familiar with a flash drive. If you don't insert a flash drive in the correct way in your laptop, it doesn't fit, it doesn't allow you. Then you realize, oh, I was putting it incorrectly. In certain gas stations, you may see that, not in all of them, of course, but in certain, you may see that the hose where you pump the gasoline doesn't fit into the tank hole of the gasoline in your car. They do this on purpose. It doesn't fit, and then you realize, oh, silly me, I was about to put diesel instead of gas into my automobile. So it's a way of preventing mistakes, of telling you that you're about to make a mistake. Same thing happens with plugs that do not fit into the wall, the holes, or things like that. Electronic polka yokes, and most especially these days, include access codes, the reading of the fingernails or the iris of the eye in airports, for example. The banks use this a lot, and not only with the cards, but access code. So if it's not the correct one, it will not allow you to withdraw money. It will not work unless it's the appropriate one. So that is the concept of polka yoke. And Kaizen, obviously, is also very important. Another Japanese words that mean continuous improvement, change for the good, continuous improvement. Finally, the last technique that has been currently being used until coronavirus is total productive maintenance. So total productive maintenance, also known as TPM, is a system of maintaining and improving the integrity of production, safety, and quality systems through the machines, equipment, processes, and employees that add business value to the organization. Total productive maintenance focuses on keeping all equipment in top working condition to avoid breakdowns and delays in manufacturing processes. Here we have a representation of what is known as the 8 pillars, the 8 bases, the pillars or columns, as we can see this in Greek temple, of total productive maintenance. The first one, autonomous maintenance. Number 2, focus improvement. 3, planned maintenance. 4, quality maintenance. 5, early equipment management. 6, training and education. 7, safety, health, and environment. And 8, total productive maintenance in administration. Those is what we know as the 8 pillars of total productive maintenance. Now, let's talk more specifically about what is going on in these days with the coronavirus, the spread of COVID-19. It all started in Wuhan, as we know. It started in China. So the first impact was the disruption in Chinese demand. The outbreak of coronavirus happened during the Lunar New Year season, when historically demands spiked for businesses in retail, catering, movie, tourism, and transportation. The city lockdown and the widespread fear of infection among the Chinese have resulted in few or no customers for many businesses. So already the reports are indicating a major decline in the revenues for these industries during this Lunar New Year season. There are also Chinese new reports of the closing of many small restaurants and lodging facilities, with workers laid off as a result. And what has started in China, same thing is happening in several other places of the world, several other countries, including America, of course. Now, the spread of the virus had the following global effects. As we can see, place cooperation, direct communication, appraisal, improvement, all this has been affected. Last week, let me tell you that I did with my students and of management. We're taking operations management in the MBA program. We did a simulation called the beer distribution game, which allows students or the users to experience in own flesh what is known as the bullwhip effect. The bullwhip effect is called like that because it resembles the shape of a whip, a bullwhip effect. So demand fluctuations, they go up and down, so it resembles the shape of a whip when you shake it. That's why they call it the bullwhip effect. It was a certainly very interesting experience that I had the opportunity to have personally, because I always do this simulation with my students in person, face to face. So using their computers, they have to make decisions in a simulation of inventory, how much to ship, how much to order, and try to keep those costs down. We always do the simulation in class, in the computer laboratory, face to face. So it's easy to communicate directly. The partners or your partner is sitting just a few inches away from you in the next chair. But now we have to do it because we're teaching online. We did the simulation online, and it was very interesting to see that certainly it was more challenging to communicate through teleconference like we're doing right now in order to make the decisions, how much to ship, how much to order. It increased the bullwhip effect. And production has reduced due to less output. As we know, productivity is measured by output divided by input. Oops, okay. So these raw materials interruptions driven by unpredicted supply from South Asia. That's how it started. So it started, and as we can see in this representation, Korea, and then the virus spread to Italy, and then they went to Canada, and pretty much then later to America. So predicting the impact of COVID-19, the future of supply chains, the general characteristic, as we know, is that for the very first time in modern manufacturing history, or I would say mankind history even, demand, supply, and workforce availability are affected globally at the same time. Something very interesting that has happened these days. So there is an imperative need to engage into digitization and have digital measures and more use of technology, especially to increase the communication channels. Long-term consequences of the pandemic are the ones that we see here. And it mentions Western societies will invest more data in networks, 5G communication technology. In telecommunications, 5G is the 5th generation technology standard for cellular networks, with which cellular phone companies began deploying worldwide in 2019. So it was a planned successor for 4G, obviously, networks, which provide connectivity to most current cell phones. So we have to mention also that operators run machines, maintenance staff maintain and repair machines. External vendors and contractors need site access to provide services and operation support. So with social distancing, as they call it these days, with these distance measures in place, manufacturers may lose up to 50% of their online personnel, which is pretty scary. Now, predicting again the coronavirus in the future, the big question to ask is, can resources satisfy the demand? And we have this scale here. You can see that the demand in many cases will be bigger, heavier than the resources. So in that case, if required capacity exceeds the available capacity, then that capacity must be increased. So that's a bigger challenge these days with coronavirus, is how can we increase that capacity to satisfy the bigger demand, heavier demand, and plans must be altered. So this is something that a little bit of what we were talking here, how to alter plans and strategies to be able to still be successful. Changes in demand, what are the consequences in this big demand and changes in demand? We can see high levels of stock out, increase of cost, increase of waste, decrease of responsiveness of the supply chain, and lower profitability. Now, what responses can we engage into? So pretty much there are two ways in which we can respond: manage supply and manage demand. Within the supply, we have to handle capacity, inventory, subcontractors, and backlogs. And to manage the demand, use short-term price discounts and trade promotions. So again, as mentioned before, this has caused a bullwhip effect, big fluctuations of demands. And there are numerous different causes of the bullwhip effect, but the most predominant, which are happening now due to the coronavirus, are demand forecast updating, delivery delays, order batching, price variation and rationing, and shortage gaming, as they call it. To correct this, we have to make demand available at the downstream side to an upstream side, which is a measure to reduce the demand signal processing. Very important to use electronic data interchange, also known as EDI, and the point of sale system, also known as POS, to help break order batching. We must reduce discount and use strategies like everyday low pricing to attack price fluctuations, and finally, share sales capacity and inventory data to eliminate the shortage gaming. So manufacturers should expect continued weakened links in their supply chain, as some vendors and suppliers will likely face operational or financial struggles of their own. So the deeper into the supply chain, the greater the impact of the outbreak is likely to be. So as with previous downturns, the industry will most likely have to move quickly to cut discretionary and capital spending to support operations. So a key question that all companies will be asking is, do we have the financial reserves to weather the storm or potentially to capitalize the tumult in industry? Can we afford it? And as is mentioned here, only the strong will survive. So here we see the formula. Capital expenditure is a variation in property, plant, and equipment plus current variation. So the depreciation, current depreciation, depreciation will start going up because there will be many machineries and many tools that have been resting there with under quarantine and has not been utilized, so that have increased the depreciation. Now the difference or the delta in property, plant, and equipment has also been changed. A certain plant and equipment has been not utilized and eventually could become obsolete. So that will increase the capital expenditures, as we can see in the formula directly. So dealing with the uncertainty of COVID-19 in supply chains, we can measure different things. Obviously, the first one is sanitary measures, reconfigure the workspaces, create new shifts, and focus on autonomous material movement, automation, and the use of robots. It will be certainly more important than ever. Now, dealing with this uncertainty, we have to consider that constantly we should appraise every link of the supply chain, especially tier 2 and tier 3, which are the base of the supply chain, the components and the materials. We have to look for buffers, accumulation of inventory, because whenever we see a buffer, that indicates the presence of a bottleneck, in particular in regions severely impacted by the pandemic. Discover and connect alternative suppliers, engage into what is known as the milk run strategy. This is a new strategy, relatively new. The milk runs, it means that we shouldn't depend only on one supplier for a particular item. Instead, we should form a network of communication and collaboration. So if one supplier cannot come, most especially during these times of coronavirus, we can always substitute it for another one into the network, and we guarantee that all the materials are delivered and delivered on time without the need of any delays. So the name comes from milk runs because the milk had to be delivered pretty quickly in order to keep it safe. So that is where the analogy comes from. It's like when we go to the dentist and we look for the insurance. These days, insurance work with a whole network of dentists, and we can choose the one that is closer to us, the one that we like. That's the same idea for suppliers. So dealing with uncertainty, it's important to prioritize cybersecurity and system resiliency. The significantly higher levels of remote access to core systems that will be required could make employees and management more susceptible to social engineering efforts in the middle of the crisis. We have to seek alternatives that allow you to preserve relationships, co-create solutions, and sustain both businesses. It's possible that a third-party provider could prove to be a critical point of failure in creating a response to the coronavirus. It's important to engage into re-engineering to create employees that are more generalists. So eventually they can substitute in other places, and we have no need to look for new employees. They're better prepared to work in any area of the business or the corporation. Safety inventory management, of course, the appropriate level of safety inventory is determined by uncertainty of demand or supply and the desired level of product availability. To measure this demand uncertainty that comes with the coronavirus, we can use two methods, the lead time and the coefficient of variation. So using the lead time means that the demand for each period K is normally distributed with a mean Ri and a standard deviation sigma I. So the total demand during K periods, K number of periods, is normally distributed with mean P and standard deviation omega. So we can calculate it, the mean and the standard deviation using the lead time. Another method is the coefficient of variation, CB, which is given by a demand with a mean mu and standard deviation sigma, where we have that the coefficient of variation is sigma divided by mu. So in other words, the standard deviation divided by the mean. This coefficient measures the size of uncertainty during the demand. So it has been mentioned that we work with a demand of 100 and a standard deviation of 100 has a greater demand uncertainty than a product with a mean demand of 1,000 and a standard deviation of 100. Consider the standard deviation alone cannot capture this difference, so we can utilize this coefficient of variation. To measure product availability, we can use product fill rate, order fill rate, and cycle service level, CSL. Now, how we can represent the uncertainty of the COVID-19? We can apply what is known as a binomial representation of uncertainty to these coronavirus times. As we can see in this representation, the idea is that the variable moves up by a factor mu greater than 1 with a certain probability p, or it can move down by a factor g less than 1 with a probability 1 minus p, obviously. So the probability, let's say 60 and 40%, there will be a probability 60% that will move up, p sub mu, and 40% probability that it will move down, the price, for example, of our products. And we continue creating this tree of uncertainty. Then we have p mu squared. So in other words, we multiply against the probability of going up again, and then, or with the probability of going down. And if we already, the price went down, again, it has the probability of going up or going down again, and it continues, the tree continues going. So here we have a practical example. Let's say that the demand of a product in a supply chain is 1,000 units. From 1 month to the next, during the coronavirus, the demand may go up by 20% with a probability of 0.5, or go down by 20% with a probability of 0.5 also. So the probabilities of the outcomes will not change from month to month. And so let's say that the corporation plans to have a price per unit of 1,200, sorry. And from month to month, the next price will go up by 10% with a probability of 0.5, 50% going down, and also 50% probability that it will go down 10%. So we can apply these binomial representations and apply it to coronavirus times. So this will be the solution in this example. Here we have demand, it's in the thousands, 100. So there will be the probability of 50% that will go up 50% that it will go down. So the 50% that will go up will make the demand increase in 20%. So the demand is now 120 in the first two arrows, 50% of probability. But also we have to consider the price. Original price, it was 1,200. So working in thousands, 1.2, and it will increase in 10% probability. 50% probability that it will increase 10%, 50% probability that it will decrease 10%. So when the demand increases to 120, 20%, we also have the probabilities that the price will increase 10% or decrease 10% to 1.0 or 1.32 if it increases. Now, the probability that the demand decreases in 20%, we have demands of 80 in both cases here. Then the price might increase 50% that it will increase 10% to 132, and 50% of probability that it will decrease in 10%, and we'll have 1.08. So this is in month 2. In month 3, again, the probabilities start multiplying, and we go into a progression. So the demand again from 120 could increase 20% to 144. The price could also increase to 1.45, or the demand could decrease to 96, and the prices could decrease to 0.97, and so on. It will continue this in progression to the rest of the months. Now, getting closer to an end, we have to mention the function of technology. So coronavirus has forced technology to be the base of competitive advantage, as we mentioned before. And it's very important to understand the planning software develops the priority plan for the release and receipt of planned orders, advises planners of the need for actions to maintain the priority plan, releases planned orders, takes action to maintain due dates affected by material shortages, delayed production, or other events. One of the technology that has been utilized for years and some corporations have left it behind, but now it's a great time to retake the challenge with the coronavirus is the MRP and ERP. So MRP, material requirements planning. So it's a production planning, scheduling, and inventory control system used to manage manufacturing processes. Most MRP systems are software-based, but it's also possible to do it by hand. Then after MRP, it came MRP2. And later on, we progressed to ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning. Systems are operational IT systems that gather information from across all company functions, resulting in entire enterprise having a broader scope. So it's creating intranet. So we sell a product and it automatically feeds the accounting system, for example, to know the costs and the profits. So material requirements planning software, we have these applications, time phase priority planning, gross, net, offset, explore requirements. For example, management support, provide actions, and provide exception messages. Now, the software from MRP is to use the electronic data interchange that I was mentioning before, EDI, and point of sale system, POS, to break the order batching. That is a consequence, again, of the bullwhip effect, big fluctuations of demand. One of the solutions to the bullwhip effect is precisely to apply EDI and POS. Now, adaptive behaviors, just to start concluding, firms competing under the threats of coronavirus must adapt to two things, basically, cost reduction and local responsiveness. With these, they should influence the future need for global standardization, localization, transnational and international supply chain management. Okay. Now, to finish up and conclude, just mentioned the strategies that we can utilize to face the coronavirus these days. We have basically 6: market saturation driven, operationally agile, freshness oriented, consumer customizer, logistics customizer, and trade focuses. The first one, market saturation, is focusing on generating high profits through strong brands. The operationally agile is configuring assets and operations to react quickly to engaging trends. Freshness oriented is concentration on earning premium by providing consumer with product and fresher competitive offerings. Consumer customizer has to do with using mass customization to build and maintain close relationships with consumers and partners. Logistics customizer is emphasizing the balance of supply chain efficiency and effectiveness, and the trade focused is prioritizing low price, best value for consumers. So these are 6 strategies that could be applicable in coronavirus times. And finally, and I conclude with this last slide, this is a personal proposal or a personal suggestion of mine, as I had the honor of presenting for you. I've been doing previous research in a new strategy called holonic manufacturing, the holonic structure. So I took the liberty of making a personal suggestion of applying these techniques of holonic manufacturing. I did even my PhD dissertation of this research. So what is this? It's come from holon. A holon is a cell that in biology has autonomy, but it also forms a network. So these apply to supply chain management. A holon is this unit that we see here, and we see on the background the whole world. So each holon has a control unit, coordination module, and internal database where the information is stored. And they share information with each one, the new branches, the other holons, through the world, and they come back, completing a cycle of communication and collaboration. That is the concept of holonic structure, which I strongly believe that will be very applicable, most especially these days that we need virtual teams and holonic structures precisely to increase communication, collaboration in these times of coronavirus. So thank you very much. This concludes the presentation. So I believe now we will open for questions and answers.
So thank you. So we've received a few questions, and let me just, in the interest of time, dive right in. One of the first questions we received was, relating to the shortages we have seen the last few months in things like toilet paper, Lysol, wipes, etc. Were those product shortages caused by different factors? And if so, what could have been done differently to address those?
Okay, yes, definitely has been a shortage, and started with safety and hygiene, personal cleaning items that everybody needs. It started with, as we remember, from toilet paper, soap, things like that. Even though these days, when the panic has decreased a little bit, it has stabilized more the market of these items. In the economy, many times we mentioned about what is known as the sentiment. It's also applied in stock market. When people feel fear, or they think that something, for example, will increase the price, and everybody starts worrying about that, the word is spread, the reaction in the economy is that indeed the price will increase. So the second part of the question, what can we do about it? In MIT, the Sloan School of Management, the famous MIT in our state here in Massachusetts, they are developing a procedure that includes an auction, dilution, substitution. So the auction, some companies are auctioning products to the highest bidder. And dilution is an attempt to meet demand. Some companies stretch supply by diluting the products. And substitution, or demand shaping, if a company has products in short supply and sufficient stock of other similar products. So here we can also observe the need for substitute products, as we know in the economy. So something is very scarce, or the prices are going up precisely because of the scarcity. It's a natural reaction, but customers will start substituting that product with something else. Therefore, the demand will change. So the decrease of demand in one product will mean the increase of demand in the other one. To give you an example, if butter becomes very expensive and scarce because of the coronavirus, people will start substituting it with margarine, so it's the substitute product.
So thank you. The second question we received is, one of our group of stakeholders are minority business enterprises, and they're involved in a lot of different industries. And for those who are in manufacturing or related industries, focusing on your alternative supplier analysis in terms of the milk run strategy, what advice would you give them to be best positioned to take advantage of opportunities that may arise because of COVID-19?
In terms of the milk runs?
Yes.
Yes, well, in these times of coronavirus, I would say the first step will be to not only familiarize, but increase our expertise and our knowledge and experience in the management of virtual teams and communication, global communication. Now, there are several obstacles that play an important role with this being said, that didn't happen when we have normal supplies and the trucks arrive every Tuesday morning, for example. Now we have to increase our expertise in virtual teams. That means overcoming obstacles such as time zones, especially these days that we have to take a look at global relationships. Even if we don't, that is the tendency. We cannot do anything about it. So different time zones, even different cultures and way of doing businesses, different languages, even though mostly English is the generally accepted and common language for business world, globally accepted, but even if that happens, and you might have noticed myself, for example, we have to talk with someone that has a different accent, like you might have heard myself, for example, right? So those are things that we have to deal with these days, and that will be the secret in order to appraise the best opportunities and know where the supply is, or not only in America or in our state of Massachusetts, for example, but worldwide, and therefore be able to select the best links and start creating that network that will be our milk run. So we have to create a network of collaboration with retailers and suppliers, so everybody connected. And as I was mentioning before, it's a matter of knowledge. Knowledge and information is the basic asset that has been mentioned these days. Like the example I gave previously, we have a dental problem. We want to seek the best possible dentist that will help us. So, but it's so expensive, as we know. So we have to benefit from the insurance. The insurance gives us a network of dentists. So the better the dentists are in that network and the bigger the network, the better for us. We have more opportunity to choose. And so the same thing will happen to the supply chain and the milk run. So that will be the secret, I would say, managing virtual teams.
Thank you. And final question, just in the interest of time. This presentation was excellent.
Thank you.
And for those who are focused on manufacturing, I think this is a wealth of information. And just for everyone who's on the webinar, we're going to share both the presentation and this session has been recorded and will be made available. But the final question I have is, if you think about those companies in our orbit who are focused on providing services rather than products, and I was thinking about the Hellenic structure you mentioned, what would be different, and should we invite you back for a totally separate presentation on how COVID-19 affects, those who are providing services rather than products?
Okay, that's an excellent question, and excellent reflection, consideration. It has been mentioned that now services will be the leader within operations and key for competitive advantage, not only among corporations, but among overall nations. And I think that precisely that would be a great opportunity for America to increase the competitive advantage that America already has had, but make it even bigger in the terms of focusing into services. Now, the holonic structure, as you were mentioning, and I presented before, and I will feel honored if anytime you're interested in reading the publications that I have about holonic manufacturing that I apply to automobile industry. But in this case, we're talking about services. We can certainly apply it. Again, it comes the advice of being familiar and being expert in virtual team communication and overcoming the obstacles that I was mentioning worldwide. So together with this, we can engage in also a new tendency that is called follow the sun. So applying holonic manufacturing into services, and what kind of services? And for example, in intellectual services, consulting, for example, teaching. Teaching would be an excellent example of a service that we should provide, not only worldwide, but even if we are one block away from each other. Because of the coronavirus, we cannot be in person and shake hands and be in direct contact. So we have to use the virtual communication. Exactly the same situation as we were contacting somebody from Spain or France or China. So there's this new technique called the follow the sun. Follow the sun. It's called follow the sun because the idea is that the service operations will continue. The teaching, for example, to give a service will continue 24/7. The idea is that people can rest, but the operations will never rest. It will continue on a 24/7 basis. That's why they call it follow the sun, because the analogy comes from eventually, well, as we know, in any part of the world, anytime there will be sun. So if it's daytime here in America, maybe nighttime in China and vice versa, but sun will always be present in some part of the world. As we know, the earth goes around the sun, not vice versa, but that's where the analogy comes from. Follow the sun. It means follow the path wherever there is sun, and we will cover the whole world. We cover globally in terms of the coverage of the services. So this is, again, very important to utilize correctly and to our benefit all the characteristics of virtual team and virtual team management, which require, for example, a new kind of leadership.
Thank you. So Dr. Torres Palacio, I want to thank you on behalf of all of those who participated today. I want to thank Jennifer, and I want to thank Bridgewater State. I think this has been a very informative presentation. We need to figure out a way to continue this conversation because, you know, COVID-19 is only the first thing we've experienced. I'm sure there are going to be other unforeseen shocks that are yet to come. So I want to thank everyone who attended. And again, the presentation and this webinar will be recorded and be made available on our website, which is www.GNEMSDC.org. So thank you again for presenting, and thank you all for attending. Have a good day.
Thank you. It was my pleasure. I feel honored to be invited to this presentation. So I am the one who has to say thank you. All right.
All right.